but it hurts.
But I love you.
But you're abusive. You did this, you said this, and then this happened. You did that.
No, I didn't. And anyway, I love you.
One of the questions that I'm asked quite a lot by people is, how do I get back into a healthy relationship after I've been in a narcissistically abusive one? And I realize now these days I'm starting to sound a little bit like a stock record. Because most people's questions get answered by me by a question, which is, are you doing the emotional literacy work? Are you working on stopping your emotional flashbacks? And I'm not being facetious, and I'm not being just a rigid self-promoter with that. The issue is twofold. One is present tense, and one is like, if you've come out of a narcissistically abusive relationship, or an emotionally abusive relationship, let's say, a psychologically manipulative relationship, you're going to be highly emotionally dysregulated. And one of the things that emotional manipulators do is they attack your confidence, they attack your sense of what is real and what isn't. When we are highly emotionally dysregulated, it warps our perceptions. When our sense of reality has been attacked, our perceptions also are dysregulated, they become warped. So it's very, very important, before you even consider getting back into the dating scene, that you emotionally re-regulate. Now, the second issue is not present tense, it's past tense. If you got into a narcissistically abusive relationship, and you've been in more than one, then it's highly likely that what's happening is you're bringing stuff forward from your past. You were probably raised in an environment where your primary caregivers were tyrannical, were excessively demanding, boundary breaking, and they forced their needs into the space where you were supposed to be developing a sense of what your needs were. Under those circumstances, you're going to develop CPTSD from childhood, which is going to lead you more likely back into an emotionally abusive relationship. Similarly, if you didn't have childhood trauma and you get into a relationship, not just with somebody who's somewhat emotionally abusive and manipulative, but actually registers on the cluster B spectrum, is a narcissist, has antisocial personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, or is a histrionic, and you feel like you can't escape, then you will develop CPTSD as well. One of the issues with CPTSD is a way of describing ongoing trauma that is typified by intrusive and unpleasant and repetitive memories that fire off like alarms, where your brain is going, look at this, think about this, then this happened, you need to think about it, and it's quite annoying. And the other thing it's typified by is overwhelming emotions that seem to come from nowhere, that seem to come out of the blue. We call these emotional flashbacks. What is causing the emotional flashbacks is rooted in the context of the traumatic relationship. If you're trapped inside of an emotionally abusive relationship, a lot of what is used against you will be called ambient abuse. It puts you into a survival mode of fight or flight or freeze or fawn. One of the other things that starts to happen is your superego becomes hijacked. Now, the superego does not mean that you're extremely egotistical. The superego is that part of the mind that goes above the ego. Super, in this context, simply means above, standing over. The superego tells the ego how to act, what to do, what is morally correct, what is morally wrong. It's kind of like a morality adjudicator, a morality judge. If you've been the victim of adverse childhood environments, it's highly likely that the superego has become hijacked and has become damaged. Once it's inflamed and it's caught this software virus, it's going to send you very negative messages about who you are. It's also going to induce emotional flashbacks in you. If you've been in an adult relationship and you've been trapped and you're reduced to a childlike state where you can't escape, that also will induce this thing that we call CPTSD. That's where you get the reality break. You're told, this is love. And you say, but it hurts. And the person says, but I love you. And you say, but you're abusive. You did this, you said this, and then this happened. You did that. They go, no, I didn't. And anyway, I love you. Everything is justified because I love you. And if you permit yourself to stay in that environment, it's usually an indication that you have a highly inflamed superego, which in the work that we do, we call an inner critic. If that is not dealt with, the superego will actually keep inducing emotional flashbacks. So what do? You've got to reduce the emotional flashbacks if you want to get into a loving relationship again, because if you're experiencing a lot of heavy emotional flashbacks, you won't see that person as they truly are, and you're at risk for getting into an emotionally abusive relationship. If you do get into an emotionally abusive relationship and you're experiencing a lot of intense emotional flashbacks, it's much more easy to manipulate you, coerce you, and imprison you. But if you have a series of emotional flashbacks in an environment, imagine it like a minefield, and you're trying not to tread on the mines because you know it's painful, that's where they'll put you in the field. Well, you don't want to be abandoned, do you? You don't want to be shamed, do you? You don't want to be guilt tripped, do you? So you have these like hanging swords, multiple swords of Damocles over you as you're trying to navigate your way through this minefield, and it lures you in to the abusive relationship and it traps you there. Because really what you should be doing is going, hey, this is not adult to adult respectful communication between two people who are on the same page, moving in the same healthy, loving dynamic, is it? No, I'm fucking out of here, which is what should be happening. That's not happening, right? But also if the superego is still inflamed, if we haven't healed the inner critic, if we haven't healed that superego injunction, then that also will keep you in the relationship, because the message from the superego will be, you deserve this. This is the best you can do. Yes, this isn't fair. Yes, you feel sad. Yes, you feel alone in this relationship, but this is the best you can do. Nobody else is going to love you. That's heavy, right? But that's the kind of superego message that is commonly reported. If you have CPTSD, you've got an inflamed inner critic, you've come from a background where basically normal human interaction makes you feel quite anxious, and you struggle with feelings of depression and despair or rage, depending on where you are on the CPTSD spectrum, you're going to be tending towards self-isolation, and therefore you're going to be tending towards being lonely. And if you're self-isolating and lonely, you're going to excessively not attach with people generally. You won't have that many friends, and then you'll excessively over-attach to a single intimate partner. If you get it right, your life looks like heaven, and if you get it wrong, then it looks like hell. So it's a big gamble that we're playing. If you want to be in a healthy, loving relationship again, you do very well to really get to your brown belt and black belt status as far as emotional re-regulation goes. You want to be emotionally literate so you can own, feel, and process your own emotions, which allows you to get in touch with your intuition and your emotional intelligence, so you can look at another person and perceive them clearly. Because if you're with an abusive type, they're going to be flinging an image at you. They're going, this is who I am. They'll pick out what your values are and they'll reflect them back to you, so that you go, oh, aren't they sweet? If your emotional literacy is high, you'll listen to the signals from your body, from your heart, from your somatic field saying, this is wrong. Something is not right here. This person is false. There is an incongruence in their communication, and that's a problem. If you're emotionally illiterate, if your emotions are set to mute, then you won't do that. You'll go, oh, that's weird. Oh, well, let's just keep going because it'll probably be okay. So you want that emotional literacy. You want to be able to reduce your emotional flashbacks, and you want to be able to silence that inner critic. You want to be able to heal that damaged, inflamed superego, because even if you reduce the emotional flashbacks, if the inflamed superego isn't dealt with, the superego itself systemically will induce more emotional flashbacks about new things. It seeps into the unconscious, and no matter what we try and do consciously to move to another place, the unconscious will win, and you'll end up going to bad places. And this is what leads to repetition compulsion and makes people walk around going, am I fucking crazy? I'm going out with a new version of the same fucking person again and again and again and again. From a purely psychological point of view, it's probably 95% adequately explained by understanding that it's your unconscious that runs your life, not your conscious mind. The ego wants to believe I'm here because I chose to sail to this point, and the unconscious laughs because no, you didn't, and that's not why you are where you are. You should go and look at that and go, well, you know, I think I'm in charge of my life, but maybe actually all of this is guided through unconscious impulses, through messages I received in childhood, through the modeling of my parents, through my responses to various situations of trauma in my life and my ways of coping with them. Maybe that's what's led me to the place where I am in my life right now. You've got to develop your emotional literacy, and you've got to heal the inner critic. Once you've healed the inner critic, once you've healed that superego injunction, and you develop the emotional literacy, you'll occupy your own space. You'll get your emotional intelligence back, which feels really good. You'll rekindle your own intuition. And from there, you'll find that your preferences, your desires, your personality, who you are, starts to rise back up into the space that you've created. Have a purpose, have a point, and if you want something to happen, make it happen. If we just go with the flow, in my humble experience, it never leads anywhere good. Only dead fish go with the flow. So once the abuse and the negativity of the superego is taken out, then you have a neutral space. And at first it'll feel, everybody says this, it feels kind of cold, it's kind of alien, it's kind of weird, because like, it's quiet in here now. It used to just be a litany of you're a piece of shit, there's something wrong with you. Now it's kind of quiet, which is uncomfortable at first. Things happen, they have their own time and their own process. But then with time, you learn that in that space, you can actually make your own choices and you can move your life in the direction you want it to go.